It's a home interview in Catskill, New York, 16th of July 2004, approximately 1:45 p.m. Interviewers are Wayne Clark and Mike Russert. Could you give me your full name, date of birth, and place of birth, please?
Joseph Martin.
Date of birth and place of birth.
February 11, 1922, Brooklyn, New York.
Okay. What was your educational background prior to entering service?
Just high school. I graduated from high school.
Okay. Do you remember where you were and your reaction, your feelings when you heard about Pearl Harbor?
Yes, we had gone to the movies in town, and when we came home, my mother had the radio on, and she says, something called Pearl Harbor was bombed by the Japanese. We had no idea what Pearl Harbor was at
most
the time.
People did.
And so then they said the president would be making an address to Congress the following day. So we listened to that.
Do you remember how you felt when you heard about this news?
It was unbelievable. We never knew we had any trouble with the Japanese, and it was a shock, really, to everyone, I suppose.
Now, were you drafted or did you enlist in service?
I was drafted. Yeah.
Drafted, okay. And you were assigned to the Army Air Corps?
Well, yeah, after basic training, we took the usual IQ tests to see where I'd be best suited, and they told me that the Air Force would be an option for me.
Now, where did you go for your basic training?
St. Petersburg, Florida. There for 10 weeks. I knew at that time that I was in the Air Force.
So your basic training was Air Force training?
Air Force training.
Okay.
Yeah. And then from there I went to Denver, Colorado for Air Force Technical School to learn aircraft armament. And
Now, what kind of specialized training did they give you there?
well, we took Morse code and instructions on assembling and disassembling machine guns and operation of turrets and bomb racks, anything to do with armament on the bomber. At that time, I didn't know what kind of a bomber plane I'd be in, but generally the course is the same for all of them. So from then I went back to Florida to aerial gunnery school, where we had training and firing from one plane to a target, to a target on the ground. And we had skip bombing training for torpedoes. The B-26 was adapted to do torpedo bombing as well as aerial bombing.
Now, you were training, at that time you were training on the B-26?
No, I didn't start. They had AT-6s at that time.
Okay, that's what you were training on.
Yeah, and then after that I went to Barksdale Field in Shreveport, and that's when I joined the B-26 group. And,
now, just for someone watching this video sometimes that may not know, what do you mean by skip bombing?
well, that's torpedo bombing. They fly at a low altitude above the water, you drop the torpedo and it skips a bomb, either a bomb or a torpedo, and like you throw rocks on the top of the water and make them skip. Skip the bomb right into the target.
Okay. Now, how long were you assigned to a crew when you reached Louisiana, or?
Yes.
Okay, that's where your crew assembled?
Not the combat crew, this is strictly training crews.
Oh, just a training crew.
Yeah, in fact, I was offered the opportunity to become a gunnery instructor while I was at Barksdale Field. And I said, well, that's going to delay my transfer overseas, but I wasn't that anxious to go overseas at that time. So I was there 11 months as a gunnery instructor, training all these crews on air-to-air target, air-to-air firing, air-to-ground, and all the other maintenance on the bomb racks. They used to do practice bombing.
Mm-hmm.
And I have my model here.
Hold it the other way. There you go.
Now, did you ever fly in any other bomber outside of the Marauder?
During training, for a short time, they had the A-26, which was an attack bomber,
Mm-hmm.
a little small plane that they were scheduled to replace, eventually replace the B-26 because they were faster and had longer range. That's one thing about the B-26, they were limited to how far they could fly. So that once we got overseas, they kept moving our bases closer to what they call the bomb line, to Germany, because of the short range of the plane.
Did you have were there any training accidents while you were training?
Oh yeah, we were sitting on the runway waiting for our turn to fly, and we had crash landings, and it was very unnerving at the time.
So it wasn't an easy airplane to fly?
No, it had a bad reputation in the beginning until I learned how to fly it. It had a very fast landing speed and takeoff speed, and they determined that what they finally did was to extend the wings another 12 feet to give it more lift. And they had many pet names for it. They call it the Widowmaker, or some words that I shouldn't say. Baltimore Bad Lady, and but General Doolittle, a well-known aviator, he took over the B-26 training to show these pilots how to fly it. And in other words, they got the bugs worked out of it, and it proved to be a very reliable plane.
Did you ever see Doolittle yourself? or-
No, he did that mostly in the States after I was overseas. I never got to meet him.
When were you assigned to your combat crew?
After I got finished at Barksdale, I went to England. We went by ship,
Were you in a convoy or a single?
single troop ship. Yeah. It was the Isle de France, a big luxury liner that they converted, and went to commanded in England, and they assigned me to a certain group that was at that time already in France. That was after the liberation of Paris, and they had taken over some of the ex-German airfields there. So that's my next move to class dress in France, where I joined the 387th Bomb Group. And that's when I met my crew. I never met any of them before that. They all had arrived at different times.
So were you a replacement or?
Yeah,
Replacement?
This was a Air Force replacement depot where I had first met them. And then we went in for 6 weeks of training, more training, and from the French Air Base before we started the flying missions. I think I flew my first mission in October '43.
What was that like?
Well, it happened to be a milk run, what they call a milk run. We got credit for the mission, even though we didn't drop the bomb, but the weather was bad. Couldn't find the target because of the overcast.
Where was the target?
It was in Holland, railroad terminal in Holland. So but the second mission and the ones after that were more successful.
Now, was your plane, did you have a name for your plane?
Yep, Holy L. Holy hell without the H.
Was it, did the crew name it?
Yes. We each made a suggestion and we voted on finally
Was there any nose art or decoration on the plane?
just the name Holy L.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
How about your jackets? Did you ever decorate your jackets?
No, we had just a standard jacket there.
You didn't wear the leather flying jackets at all, or
Oh yeah, but we didn't decorate.
you didn't put anything on them?
No. That was for the big boys, the ones that flew the B-17.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just wondered if you
No.
did that. Now, when you were in the plane, did you wear your flak jacket?
Oh yeah. Well, at times I wore it, and other times I knelt on it because I was a tail gunner. I was very cramped back there,
Mm-hmm.
and so instead of sitting upright, I knelt on the I had a armor plating on 3 sides of me, so I was worried about something coming from underneath. I put the flak jacket down and knelt on it.
Was it cold back there?
Yeah. We had heated suits.
Did they always work?
Mine always did. I never had any. A couple of crew members had frostbite once on their hand mainly, because to try to handle the guns with these big gloves it was a little different, difficult. Yeah. So I flew 40 missions altogether.
Were you ever attacked by fighters?
Yes. In fact, our plane was so badly damaged on mission number 30 that we had to make a crash landing when we got back to the base.
Could you tell us about that mission?
Yes, it was the town of Mayen in Germany. It was a communications and transportation center where main roads and railroads all converged. And at that time, the Germans were retreating back towards Germany, and they wanted to disrupt their transportation as much as they could. And it was very heavily defended. And after the flak stopped, and then the fighters came in, and we had quite a few holes in our ship, and it also shot out the hydraulic system, so we couldn't lower the landing gear. You had to land the plane on the belly. I've got pictures of it.
Now, did your pilot tell the crew to jump,
He
or?
said we had the option. He said, I think we can make it home. He said, told me that he had made a belly landing once before during training. And he said, I feel confident that if we're lucky and we make it back, I can do it. Otherwise, if you don't have any doubts, as soon as we get over behind the German lines, in front of the German lines, you can bail out. But we all decided to stay with the plane. That was my most exciting mission.
Was anybody injured on that flight?
Well, the pilot and the engineer were injured, but it was only from flying glass because the windshield and some of the windows shattered when they hit the ground, and they had some flying glass on their legs, but nothing serious. But we had a procedure where we had to sit with that back against a bulkhead and a head down between our
Crash position.
crash position, right. And it worked out fine. I had a lot of confidence in my pilot.
Did you always fly with that pilot?
Yes, all bombing missions. So some of the training missions we had in between where we were testing new, like this Pathfinder that they used to have so they could bomb targets that were covered by clouds. They could find them with this, with the oboe. It was a very highly classified unit that the British had invented. It worked by sending out radio signals to to the plane, and the plane would pick them up and fly a beam right to the target. So we did some practice missions with that because my pilot was not a pathfinder pilot. There were only certain ones that would do that. So we flew a few missions with different pilots, with just training. We didn't do any actual bombing.
What were the targets in the majority of your missions, would you say?
They call us the bridge busters. Most of them are bridges or highway intersections. And then also with the bridge targets, there was railroad yards. And after bombing, we could go down on the deck and strafe on the ground. What they call target of opportunity on the way home. But mostly bridges, and we did a good job at it. I got pictures of that too. Got my album here.
Okay, so did you ever have anyone on the crew that was injured or wounded at all in the combat flights?
Just that one crash landing with the glass cut wounds.
Did you ever see any of the German jets?
We saw one time, towards the end of the war. I think probably about 37th or 38th mission. But the Germans didn't know hadn't learned how to fly them in order to attack bombers. Their speed was so fast that by the time they sighted the bomber, they were past it. At least that's the way they explained it to me.
It was a good thing.
Yeah. They did some damage towards the end of the war, but I really got over there late because the Paris had already been liberated and they were heading for the Holland and Belgium, and the German Air Force was not a factor and towards the end of the war. The anti-aircraft fire was the worst for us. It caused a lot of damage.
Now you mentioned in this form you sent in to us that you spent most of your time living in tents rather than in a barracks.
Oh yes, because as I said before, when we left England and went to France, these were all airfields that the Germans had been using that were bombed by the Allies for those 3-4 years. So there were no permanent buildings. The Corps of Engineers went in there ahead of us, and they did a great job. They put up a lot of these Quonset huts, and what they were.
Yes.
Quonset huts. And pyramid tents, 6-man tents, and they had everything ready for us when we moved in.
How often did you move, would you say?
Moved to 3 different bases in France, each one further east towards Germany, and the last one was in Holland. That was on my 39th mission. We flew from there to Magdeburg, which was this big, large German city close to Berlin. The Germans were using that as a fortified city and concentrating a lot of the stuff there to slow down the Allied advance. And in the meantime, the Russians had captured Berlin, and the war was close to an end. My 40th mission was a road, a highway and bridge that the Germans were using to retreat ahead of Patton. Patton was driving through, and he wanted to get to Berlin, but the Russians got there first.
Now, your 40th mission, was that supposed to be your last, or the war had ended and that made it your last?
Well, yes, it did in a way, because they come out with this point system. So many points for each month in combat, so many points for each mission, and anybody with over 85 points would be rotated back to the U.S. And they said it's possible that they would be sent to the Pacific because the Japanese war was still on. But then on our way home, I came home by air via Iceland and Greenland. And while we were in Iceland, we got the word that they had dropped the atomic bomb. And then when I got back to the States, we came in at Bradley Field in Windsor Locks, Connecticut. And they came out with the word that we reassigned to a replacement depot.
Now, what was your feeling when you heard that the atomic bombs were dropped?
But we didn't know what it was. But they said they had done terrible damage, and they assumed that the Japanese wouldn't be taking too much of that. And but we were glad to hear it, because we figured that, but then, if that was the case, that war would end too, and then we'd go home.
Do you remember where you were and your reaction when you heard about the death of President Roosevelt?
Yeah, well, the way we heard about it, we had no radio at the tent at that time. Some of them did, but we heard a lot of loud talking and celebrating, and other tents where they had radios, and they told us though they weren't celebrating, they had heard about Roosevelt's death. But then we get they published these Stars and Stripes newspaper, and we went to the canteen and picked up a newspaper to read about it. And that's when so we were naturally very saddened by it. We didn't know who Harry Truman was either. He was the vice president, but it wasn't that well known.
Yeah, I think most of the veterans we've talked about had no idea who he was.
Yeah. So,
when were you discharged?
almost 3 years to the day when I went in. It's October 1st, 1945.
Did you ever make use of the GI Bill?
No. I had enough of school, and so the only thing I take advantage of is the VA hospital.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever use the 5220 Club?
I don't remember what that was.
It was like an unemployment insurance, $20 a week for 52
yeah.
weeks.
Yeah. I don't think I did collect it for 52 weeks, so I got a job. And my old job that I had before I went in, the produce clerk in the Grand Union store.
Mm-hmm.
But then after that, I went to New York, Brooklyn, New York, where my uncle had a factory, and he gave me a job there. And got married. And my wife wasn't happy in the city. I met her here. She lived here in Catskill. And we didn't want to raise our kids in that environment, so we moved back up to Catskill. I got the job in a cement plant in the laboratory and retired from there.
Did you join any veterans organizations?
Well, I had joined the American Legion when I was living in Brooklyn, but I never really enjoyed the meetings because it was in my mind, it was a good excuse to get drunk. And these guys got so loud and crude. My wife didn't enjoy it when we took her to the meetings, so I just didn't bother anymore.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever stay in contact with anyone that was in service with you?
Yeah, for a couple of years. They gradually, especially when I moved from the Brooklyn back up to here, to Catskill, I sort of lost contact. My closest friend that was in the same tent with me, he stayed in me, and he was having troubles at home, I guess. He didn't want to go home. So he ended up, the last I heard, he was down in Panama. And another one, passed away. In fact, most of them passed away. They're all in their 80s. I was the youngest one in the tent. I was 20 years old at the time. But these other 3 friends that I had were, they must be been in their mid-80s if they're still alive.
So you think your pilot has passed away by now?
Yeah, he was the oldest. He had been in the service 6 or 8 years before the war started.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think your time in service changed or affected your life?
Well, I don't think it changed me that much because I was, as I say, I was 19, 20 years old, and I thought it was a great adventure. I got a chance to see, I traveled around a lot, all over the U.S. I went from Park to Louisiana to Colorado.
You had never traveled that much? You had never traveled that much before that?
I never left Catskill.
Mm-hmm.
And went to San Antonio. We used to have what they call strange field landings to train the pilots to land the plane at strange, unfamiliar fields.
Mm-hmm.
San Antonio, Texas, Tyler, Texas, Ardmore, Oklahoma City, Columbus, Indiana. I saw all these because they give you an overnight pass to stay at these strange fields. So we had a chance to see all this. Salt Lake City, Utah.
Did you get to see any USO shows at all?
Oh yeah, saw Bob Hope
Uh-huh.
when I was in Louisiana. I didn't see any overseas. They didn't have in France. It was right after the invasion, and a lot of these, they didn't have any facilities for anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever have much contact with the French people at all?
Yeah, well, I was handicapped because I couldn't speak French, but the engineer on my crew could speak a little French, so we managed to get a few conversations going. And we used to go to these little French pubs and have champagne that they hid away from the Germans. Yeah, it was quite an experience. We had a lot of spare time when I was in France. We didn't fly missions every day, or even maybe even once or twice a week, mainly because of the weather, and the troops were moving so fast they often overran targets that they had planned on. That was the case in Magdeburg. We were supposed to evac the next day. They did what they call carpet bombing. They had 1,000 bombers going one behind the other in groups of 54 or 36, and to just demolish the whole city. And they were supposed to go back the second day and finish the job, but friendly forces that were in the suburbs, so they canceled it. And that happened more than once, that they overran the target, so we had to pick an alternate then. Yeah.
Now you sent us this photograph. Could you just, if you just hold it like this, Wayne could focus on it. When and where was that taken?
Taken at Barstow, Louisiana on June 19th of 43.
Now was that while you were an instructor down there?
No, that's while I was still a sergeant. I got the staff sergeant rating after I became an instructor.
Okay.
That was probably in October of 43.
Okay. Do you want to get his uniform and hold that up? And
I can get it.
His jacket, it doesn't quite fit. That's
No, it
why
doesn't quite
he doesn't
fit.
have it on.
A little warm too.
Yeah.
Oh, those are gunner's wings?
Yes. Air crew member wing, they call it.
Okay. I see you've got the air medal with several clusters.
Yeah.
Okay. And what are the other ribbons?
One's the World War II Victory Medal,
Okay.
and the other one with the oak leaf with the stars on it is European, African, and Middle East theater.
Okay.
Now you had a scrapbook, you wanted to show us some photographs?
Yeah, be care to look at it. I don't know what you need this for the video, but
Wayne can really focus in on them, I don't,
You had one of de Gaulle, right? Didn't you?
well, yeah.
oh, that's a nice one.
Yeah, that's
He's got some really nice pictures.
Now, could you tell us about that? Is that your...
a squadron emblem.
Mhm.
Which warriors?
Okay. Who's that fella down there in the corner?
That's Lieutenant Colonel Whitfield. He was commanding officer at the time.
Is that why you were called Witt's Warriors then, from
Yeah.
his name?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. These are pictures of liberation of Paris. I didn't actually take these myself. I got them after I had passed Paris.
Okay.
These are starting out here in the tent city in France where we lived.
So even in the winter you lived in a tent, how was it heated?
We had a little pot-bellied stove.
Mhm.
We used to go out and scrounge wood.
So you had to get your own fuel, they didn't supply it?
No. It was fairly comfortable though.
How many men lived in a tent?
Six men.
Yeah, I think you said a six-man tent before.
There's a crew tent numbers here.
Okay.
These are various scenes around the air base of the destruction. And, see this bombed out building that was on, that's all was on the base when we moved in. And this anti-aircraft protection. There's a bomb hole. And very different bombs. This one was called Tiger Bell.
Now, were those German planes that were crashed around your base?
Yeah, they were there when we moved in.
Oh, okay.
Hold it up.
Now, that was a German base at the time, prior to you going there?
Yeah, well, the
Oh,
Germans were there, and they had occupied France for 4 years.
Mhm.
They had built quite a few
Right.
air bases there.
Now, is that your plane? I can't.
I can't see. Yeah, this is the second plane we had. That's the first one. On mission number 30 is the one that crashed.
Now, did you name a second plane at all, or?
Yeah, my pilot named was Dixie Darling. That was he was a South Carolina boy, and Dixie Darling here. Here's plane. There's one plane missing out of this group of 6 that was shot down. And here's one dropping bombs. I don't know if these are going to come out or not.
No, they do. They
Yep.
come out very well.
Here's the crashed plane that we barely landed with. That's me standing there by the tail. That's my gun position, the tail gun.
Now, were you riding in the tail when it landed?
No, we had as I said, we had a procedure where we sit in a crash position with our back against the bulkhead.
Okay.
Where did you go? More into the center of the plane when that
Yeah.
happened? Uh-huh.
That would be behind the bomb bay there.
Mhm.
There's a bulkhead separating the the bomb bay from the tail section.
The plane didn't catch fire when it
No.
crashed.
Well, my pilot was smart.
Mhm.
He had experience, as I said before. And instead of landing on the concrete, he landed on the grass.
Oh, okay.
So there were no sparks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There were some that burst into flames when they crash landed, but we were lucky. These aerial shots, bombed bridges that we bombed. And this is a can't see what that is. This one here.
It just says destruction of a city,
Oh yeah.
showing the center of the city being,
Oh yeah,
the
right.
damage to the center of a city.
And this is where they had 30,000 German prisoners that surrendered. They have them all in this fenced in this area here. We took that from the air too.
Were you ever aware of the concentration camps?
No, we never heard of them
Mm-hmm.
till after the war. They weren't discovered till quite late in the
Right,
war.
yes.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, with you moving, if you ever were made aware of them.
No. There's a pontoon bridge. When we bombed the regular bridge, by the time the troops got there, they couldn't get across the river, so they put these pontoon bridges in.
Mhm.
Those Seabees and the engineers, they were wonderful. Unbelievable how the work that they did preparing the airfields.
Mhm.
Here's more aerial shots. These are bomb bursts in the middle of this city here. This destruction of the city of Düren, Germany. Just a pile of rubble with a roadway going through it between. That's the end of the photographs.
Show them your emergency kit then.
Oh yeah, yeah. We always took an emergency kit with us. Had it in here in case you had to bail out.
Mm-hmm.
Had in here this map and this hacksaw blade, which you could use to fire yourself out of jail if you get captured. And this is a map of Germany. It also had a compass in there, but I don't know whatever happened to the compass.
And that map's in nice shape. Someone just donated a silk map to us.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
They said most of the wives and girlfriends ended up with them, and they used them as scarves.
Yeah.
Really?
yeah.
Wow.
You say you have one of these?
Yes, we were just donated one of the maps. I think he was a B-24.
I believe
Yeah.
so.
Yeah,
Out of England.
Everybody in the crew had them with them when they flew.
Yeah, I don't think we've ever seen one with the case and the saw in it.
No,
He just had the map itself.
yeah.
So.
This is my map, and it shows where all the missions I flew.
Hold that up there so I can see.
So those are the targets that you
Yeah,
had,
yeah.
you missioned.
This is,
Did you ever keep a journal or a diary?
yeah,
No, you did. You still have it?
yeah.
He has everything. Saved everything.
I got all my orders. This is the one for this is all the missions that the 387 bomb group flew, and the ones with the check
Oh,
mark.
that you checked were ones you were on.
Yeah, right.
I don't know if you want to focus in on that.
Okay.
And these are the orders for the air medals.
If you just hold it up to the camera, your air medal.
Okay, got it.
This is the World War II Victory Medal. Most all GIs got that. It's automatic, so it's certain.
Okay.
And this is the campaign medal. Europe has the 3 stars. Europe, Africa, and Middle East campaign.
Okay.
And these rest of these ribbons are on the jacket and the that's the aircrew member badge.
Do you want to hold that up in front of you? Okay, got it.
All right, well, thank you very much for your interview.
Oh, I
Thank you.
appreciate you coming out here to do this.